G'day, ZiggyD here with another Path of Exile gearing guide. In this particular video I'm going to be taking a look at belts. Now belts are the strength and armor type slot in much the same way that gloves were the dexterity type slot. However, like rings and amulets, they're also an accessory, and that means they have quite a large variety of possible mods that they can roll. The variety isn't quite as large, the mod pool isn't quite as large as it is with rings and amulets, but still a lot of flexibility to be had in belts, and a few interesting mods on belts that you really can't get anywhere else as well. So first things first, let's go over the actual base types of belts that you can get. Obviously you want to know the basic type of belt you want to wear before you even want to start thinking about mods. So the first one is the leather belt, and this is your life type belt. Now these are by far the most popular because most builds need a lot of life, and if you add the implicit life rolls to an extra life mod roll, then you can get well over 100 base life on that, which multiplies out to be quite a lot once you add in all your percent life passives and things like that. The actual life range on the leather belt is 25 to 40, so this 41 here is a maximum roll, as you can see there. The next one is the chain belt, which is to maximum energy shield. It's a slightly lesser amount, but again, if you're playing like a CI build or a low life build, the extra maximum energy shield can really multiply out quite a lot once you add in your passive tree, your passive skills. The mod range on this one is 9 to 20 energy shield. And then next up we have strength. So as I was saying, belts are the strength slot. The only type of main stat belt that you can get is the strength belt. You can't get a dexterity or an int belt, so dexterity or int classes are usually better off going with life or energy shield depending on the setup, or maybe with one of the other belt types that I'll go over. But so heavy belts are somewhat popular. Usually most people that would go for a heavy belt will go for a leather belt instead, just to go for that extra life. But maybe if you're really trying to max out your damage, and or you need a bit of extra strength for something, then the strength belt could be pretty useful. The actual range on the strength belt in terms of the implicit mod is 25 to 35 strength rolls. So this one's about middle of the road there. The next one is the rustic sash, which is the first belt you'll probably encounter in the game. Maybe you'll get a chain belt, but the rustic sash gives you, I believe it's 3 to 5 increased physical damage. Obviously this is a fairly minor roll, and 3 to 5 is like about 1 passive on the tree for most people, and there's a lot of passives that are even better than that. So it's a good belt when you have nothing else, and maybe in some very specific builds in Default League that need a lot of extra damage, this might be a good one to go, but then the strength belt probably trumps it anyway, so the rustic sash isn't really worth considering too much. Next up we have the studded and cloth belts, and these are both like your stun sort of belts. So the first one is the studded belt, and that's for builds that want to put out a lot of stuns. So the mod range on the studded belt is 20 to 30 increased stun duration on enemies. So if you're trying to go like for a permanent stun build, like a fast attacking, lots of stun chance, a build that really focuses on stun locking mobs as much as possible, then the studded belt is your belt. Other than that, it's not really a good belt for any other type of build. The next one is the cloth belt, which is the opposite of that and reduces stun taken on you. So if you're not getting something like unwavering stance, or you can't get enough stun reduction, and maybe you're like a CI build and you really need that stun reduction, then the cloth belt might be a good one to go. And I see a few builds using this, but then the chain belt might be a better option or something like that. So it's a little bit iffy as well. The range on this one is 15 to 25% stun recovery. So that's the end of that there. So now let's talk about the actual mods that you can roll, and as usual I'll put these up on screen. Now I just wanted to put out a reminder that you can only get 3 prefixes and 3 suffixes on a rare belt max. Sometimes you might roll 2 and 2, or 2 and 3, or 3 and 2, or something like that, some combination. And on magics you can only get 1 suffix and 1 prefix. So in terms of prefixes, you have armor rating, 400 with a max of 400, so that's quite a lot of armor rating as well, and that's available across any belt type. So as I was saying, it's sort of like the armor and strength slot. That's one you can get there. So if you're a build in need of a lot of extra armor rating, then the belt's a good place to get it. The next roll that you can have is max energy shield roll, then you can get max life, and then you can start getting some interesting ones that are very specific to belts, which are flask life recovery rate and flask mana recovery rate. So that increases the speed at which your flasks recover your life or mana. The mana one isn't very popular, but the life one can be very popular. It's also very good in the early game as well, especially if you're racing. You'll try and roll one of those increased life recovery rates, because it can save your life in certain situations. Other than that, you have thorns or physical damage returned to attacker, sort of the roll. And then the final one that is really good prefix is weapon elemental damage. So if you're playing an attacking build, not a spell build, weapon elemental damage is a very good stat to get. Now in terms of suffixes, you have added strength, and that's a max roll of 50. So as I was saying, armor and strength slot, pretty hammered that in home there. Strength can roll on any belt type, like dex can roll on any type of glove. Other than that, you have all of your single resists, so fire, cold, lightning, and chaos damage resistances, and they are all a single affix each. I just want to point that out specifically because you can't get all of those resists together on belts. Each one is a single resist, so you can get lightning, chaos, and fire, and that eats up all of your 3 suffixes like that. Next up, you have life regen per second, and then you have base stun duration, an increased percent on that, and then base stun threshold reduction, which increases your chance of stunning. So both of those mods together obviously increase the amount that you can, how often you'll stun, and then how long you'll stun for. So if you're going for a very stun focused build, you want to get like a studded belt with those 2 mods. So they're pretty good for that very specific build type there. Other than that, you also have a few flask, a few other flask mods there that are all actually really quite good. The first one is increased flask charges gained, so that's very important if you're using like lots of quicksilvers, or back when diamond flasks were back in the game, lots of diamond flasks, but they're not in it anymore, or lots of granite flasks. It means as you kill each mob, you're going to get more flasks per mob than you would otherwise. The next one is reduced flask charges used, so that's the very opposite of that, and obviously those 2 can synergize very well into meaning that you can use your flask much more often, which is always a pretty good thing. Flasks are very important. And then the final one is flask duration. That one can be like a double-edged sword, because sometimes you don't want the increased duration, but then other times, like maybe you have a certain flask that has an effect on it, like increased elemental resistances, then you want as longer duration as possible so that it actually, those resistances kick in for as long as possible. Now, the final thing I'm just going to go over is like the really valuable mods. I sort of pointed it out as I was going through them, but just wanted to really home in on what the really, really good ones are. So if you see these on a belt, especially together, then you probably know that you've got one that's worth quite a bit of currency. So the first one is life. Obviously, if you can get like a life build with increased maximum life, like I have on this belt here, I've got the 36 implicit roll and then that 82 max mod roll, which is actually very high. I think somewhere around 100 is max. That's obviously a very good roll to have. Next one is flask life recovery. As I was saying, flasks are very important. That's a very good mod to have. The next one is energy shield. If the belt's a good one for an energy shield. So obviously, if you get a chain belt with an energy shield roll as well, that can be very valuable. And then the final one is weapon elemental damage. Any attacking build pretty much wants weapon elemental damage, except for some niche physical damage type builds. And then in terms of suffixes, each of the single resists is always good to have. So if you get a belt with 3 resistances and they're all fairly high rolls, like at least over 20 or 30, then you've got a pretty valuable belt just from those resists alone. And then although resists are probably the most popular suffixes of belts, most people will try and get a belt like a tri-resist belt. However, as I was saying, those flask mods are very valuable. So each of the 3, flask charges gained, flask charges used, those 2 are very valuable, and then flask duration can also be quite valuable. However, I actually think those 3 mods are very undervalued by most people. So most people will see those on a belt and just think, oh, that's a nothing stat. But then players that really know the value of flasks and, or have a build really centered around flasks, like granite flasks and things like that, they'll know that those stats are really worth it. And since you can't get them anywhere else, very worthwhile having, and maybe worth sacrificing some resists if you can pick them up somewhere else. So anyway, hopefully you guys have found this helpful. That's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.